So I have been the UAT lead for probably 6 years, and with a variety of kids that we're looking at and technology and experience. And I have the pleasure, I guess, of training people mostly on assistive technology at our school. And I've been to a couple of presentations today, and this same definition it could be as complicated as eye gaze or an assistive technology device. It could be as simple as a visual schedule. There's lots of everything in between. So as we are looking at assistive technology in the IEP, it's really important to document not only the devices, but also the services that are provided in order to support those devices. We want to have these devices in the IEP. Why? So when they what? Exactly what they are looking at. Look, I have a really cool pin and a new device. This is kind of fun. This is kind of a fun game. It keeps everybody on their toes. Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes. Yes, and I'm trying to repeat. I'm also told I have to stay right here. So I might be chucking things at you guys. Just know that remember we did the basketball thing. Chad's not in here, I don't think. But I am worse than Chad. He was very impressive when he threw that ball into the hoop. I am nowhere near that good. So as long as I make it on the half of the room where you are, we'll consider it a success. Yes, so we want to make sure that the child's current team knows what the device is and knows how to use it. What else? Why? What are some other reasons why we want it in the IEP? Yes.
So that for years in the future, so you can see what has been tried, what worked in the past. Sometimes like years later that you might want to revisit maybe something that worked in the past.
Yeah, so to keep some continuity, and I'm so glad you brought that up because we're going to talk about a continuity checklist here in a little bit. Oh, Jody Lynn, you're the best. Jody Lynn's going to hand out the mic. Okay. So if assistive technology services are included in the IEP, there should be goals and there should be a service time or service description, I guess is a better way to talk about that, listed. Why? Why do we care about that? Absolutely. So the child needs dedicated time to learn that device. That is perfect.
I can't hear it, so we're just making sure online.
I have to remember to wait now. That's the only thing. I have to wait till you actually get the mic.
Just so that it gives us a way to collect data of how effective it really is in giving them access to the general ed curriculum.
Yeah. So I'm going to expand a little bit on both of these. So when we're talking about the child needs time to learn the device, or we need to be able to train them on it, who else needs training? Everyone, teachers, everybody, basically that's around that child, right? So I'm sure we've all had the experience of handing a child a device and it's not successful because they haven't had the context to implement that device or to use that device in. They haven't had the training. They don't know how to use it. So they're not, when we're talking about communication in particular, but any type of assistive technology, our kids are going to use the path of least resistance, right? So if you give them an AAC device or another device and they have another way to do it that meets their need that's easier than that, they're going to use that. So we have to train them or it's going to end up as a really, really fancy, expensive paperweight on the teacher's bookshelf. So we have to make sure that there is a goal. Let's think in terms of IDEA. When we're thinking about assistive technology, how does it apply to IDEA? Yeah. Oh, sorry, hold on one second. You need a mic.
Well, the student will be able to access their schooling regardless of their disability or their handicap
Right.
condition.
Yeah. So all of our districts have this secret stash in a mountain somewhere because we're in Utah, right? They have a secret stash of technology that we just throw out at students, right? So we have to actually show, sorry, oh, that was a really bad throw. We have to actually show that the student requires the technology in order to access their educational program. And the way that we do that is through the IEP. So how many of you write assistive technology goals in your IEPs? Good. Yay. If you do that, give yourself a great big hand. If you are still learning to do that, give yourself a great big hand because we're going to get there. We're going to get there. All right. So when we're looking at documenting services into the IEP, there's in my mind, three different ways that we can do this. We can write a goal that supports the use of that technology. That can be in communication, writing, it could even be play skills. I mean, there's 100 different things that could be written for, right? We also can write direct services in order to train staff, parents, students on how to use that device. The third way is to write in accommodations. And this can look like a couple of different things. We're going to go through this in more detail here, but it could be writing in the actual device in a couple of different ways. It could also be writing in something like consult services that doesn't involve that direct training, but we're still doing regular check-ins. We're making sure that the staff knows what they're doing. We're observing the student to make sure that they're still continuing to progress with the device. We're problem-solving devices. As I've been sitting here at the UAT conference today, I've gotten three separate messages from people saying that their assistive technology devices are failing in one way or another back at my school. So we're going to be working on that tomorrow afternoon. All right, so the first place to document services is on the service and placement page. Everyone in here knows what I'm talking about when I mean the services and placement page, right? This is where services and placement are listed. Hence, it's called the services and placement page. Later on, I have a copy of what our services page looks like. Everyone's looks a little bit different. But as we're going through here on the services page, what are the differences between direct services and accommodations in your mind? And you can cheat and look at the screen if you need some help. Okay, so which one is not directly working with the student? So she's saying accommodations is not working directly with the student. Okay?
Say that again. What was that? Medicaid billing.
Medicaid billing, expand on that a little bit. Hold on. Let's get you the microphone.
So we can bill Medicaid for related services or medically related services, but we couldn't bill Medicaid for accommodations.
Right. Hopefully all you guys heard that, right? Assistive technology services are a Medicaid reimbursable or a Medicaid billable service, but the device itself is not. Perfect. So that is one funding, money. That's a really good reason to put services in that related services section versus just listing a device as an accommodation. What else is the difference? Yeah, Jody Lynn.
Accommodations are supposed to be in all environments, and services might be environmentally specific, like in a bedroom, in a classroom, with an aide, with aid support. But accommodations shouldn't be happening no matter what environment they go in, because it's just something they need to be successful in anything.
Yeah, I love that. I think this is why I have all you in this room, so that I can learn all these fantastic definitions and insight. That's perfect. I agree. Generally, services, again, are directly either with the student or with a staff member, and it probably is in a very specific setting, since we have to specify that in the IEP, right? We have to specify whether the student is receiving services in a special education or a general education setting. With services, I've listed what it could potentially look like. Again, it could be consultation, it could be device programming or troubleshooting, it could also be direct training. Can you think of anything else that would fall under this direct services umbrella? Yeah.
In just kind of all of it, in recent years, we've been told we can't put consultation services on our IEPs for SLPs. Does anybody else run into any of that?
So this is up to interpretation, and I know that everybody hears this a little bit differently. So if that's what your district has told you, I am not here to tell you differently. Do what your district is telling you. So according to IDEA and some interpretations, as long as services are listed without specifying under that related services section, they could actually be either. They could be direct services or they could be consultation. However, again, I'm warning you right now, everybody interprets this a little bit differently, and I don't want to get anybody in trouble. So you do what your district told you to do.
Your online commenter just said she has also heard the same thing on consultation. May I take just a sec on that?
Yes, please.
Tentatively, I'm a speech path, so in my district, my very rural district, we have heard the same thing. And one way to kind of look at it, because like you said, it's totally interpretational, is if you're needed to consult, then couldn't what that child needs just be accomplished with an accommodation, rather than you actually having to document 5 minutes a month that this happened? So I think what they're trying to tell you is, if all you're needed is 5-10 minutes a month for your consultation, or just as a teacher needs you as a reference, you do that all the time. If you're getting stopped in the hall, you're being, PLC. So I think at least kind of our understanding, but like you said, it's completely open to interpretation.
Yeah,
And
and all
your
of this
districts.
makes 100% sense. It all makes sense.
Have a hand up at one point over here, though.
I was just going to say, on the one in services, you're specifying minutes served and accommodations or not.
Yeah, and I love that perspective. That's actually one of the reasons why, like, there's some difference, I guess, in the interpretation of consultation, because there are some consultations, like I've seen consultation written in for 2 hours a month, which is a lot for an accommodation. So absolutely, I think that's a great perspective. Thank you.
Angie online just said that's why we're told not to do it. I'm not sure which comment, Angie, you were responding to. Sorry, I'm
Thank
trying
you
to
for
reach.
No, I appreciate you
your
watching that,
pop-up, so
'cause
I'm
I
your
can't watch
online.
it. So thank you.
So let's see if she pops up again with what question she answered, but I saw a hand up here.
Just gonna say, I've written myself in as a consultation just for a specific task. I wonder if that would be, like, if the student needed a specific social story for something they were up against at that time, then they come to me, like, just to let the next teacher know, like, come to me, come to speech for me to write you the social story or whatever, but it's not an ongoing every single month
Right.
or quarter even that they need to consult me. Would that still be okay, you think?
Yeah.
Because you aren't gonna build that. Are you gonna put that in?
No, I wouldn't. I just put that in, I just do it, but I want the teacher to know that they can reach out to me as a consultative service for that.
Yeah, and again, it really depends on your district. That could go under accommodations.
Yeah.
I would put something like that probably under accommodations, because you're just checking in periodically.
Okay.
So you're not gonna put minutes.
No.
Right. And the way that I look at it is, if you have a set time that you're going into that classroom once a week, twice a week, and you're spending 30 minutes every time you go in, that's probably a little bit more than a consultation. But it kind of, again, it depends. Okay, let's talk through anything else you all would add under direct services or services. I guess I should clarify since they're not all direct. Okay. Remember, services should go under the related services section of the services page. That's a lot of services in one sentence. Accommodations. These look like what we were just talking about. I think what all of you were hitting on. This would be like if you're popping into a classroom to talk to the teacher for 5 minutes to make sure that everything is working well. That would go under, I would put that personally under the accommodation section. You could put that as needed. I'm sure most of you probably know the abbreviation PRN is as needed, but wanted to clarify that. This could be just regular check-ins. You could have that under accommodations just to make sure that the device is still working and that the student is still successful with it. And then this is where you want to list the type of equipment that the student is using. And I'm going to get, we were just a little bit controversial. I'm going to dive a little bit more into that controversy pool right here. My first recommendation is that if you have most devices, most assistive technology devices, you want to describe those in general terms. So you don't want to say, I have a wiggle seat brand dynamic seating device for a student, because when that student moves to a different classroom, to a different setting, they have to use that specific brand of item. I think we're all clear on that. I think where I'm going to get controversial is with high-tech assistive or AAC devices. With those devices, it can be helpful either in the present levels or in the accommodations to list the specific device. The reason for that is because it takes a long time for a kid to learn an AAC device, right? So if a kid has spent the last 4 years learning to use ProLoco to go, they move to a new district and that district starts implementing LAMP. That child is going to have a bigger learning curve and they're going to be set back a little bit versus just having the same program. So I'm not telling you you have to do this, but this is something to think about with something like a high-tech AAC device so that that child can jump right in and pick up where they left off.
One thing our district has started doing is to list it broad first and then be specific. So we'll say a voice output device such as an iPad with ProLoco, so that it doesn't have to be that, but they know exactly what we have.
And I've seen, thank you. I've seen a lot of districts who have mentioned it. Thank you. Look at this teamwork over here. Good job, guys. I've seen a lot of districts who will list AAC device as an accommodation, and then in the present levels, they will say it is recommended the child continue to use an AAC device such as whatever, or the child has been using ProLoco in the past, or they'll mention something in there. Again, this is since I get the microphone, I get to say my opinion, but my personal opinion is if you have something that is that complex that the child is showing success with, I would list it somewhere in the IEP so that the next team knows where to start with that kiddo and they don't have to start from scratch. Okay, this is what our services and placement page looks like. So I just wanted to show you what those assistive technology services could look like. We use Embrace. Does anyone else in here use Embrace for their system? Okay. Within Embrace, I wish that they would have a specific, in their drop-down menu on their services page, you have to select one of their pre-populated options. I know that some of the other systems have something similar to this. So when you put it in Embrace, you have to click on Other, and then you have to type in the Assistive Technology Services. I wish they would just put it in as a choice, but they don't. So there you go. And then I think it was Jody Lynn that mentioned the environment. So you do want to specify where you are working with the student, in the regular education or general education setting or in the special education setting, and then you're going to specify your minutes. Okay, present levels. So I am not going to read through this because I think we all read present levels late at night in order to help us get sleepy. None of them are very exciting reading, but this is a specific example of how you can word at present levels looking at assistive technology. So this is an example we were just talking about listing the specific AAC device in a student's IEP. So it says, the first sentence says they've received services with goals addressing AAC use, and in the parentheses, lamp words for life. So that's one example of how you could list that device. This particular student had a goal that had them using their AAC. Kennedy will use grammatically correct sentences consisting of 5+ words and 80% of opportunities when given fading cues over 3 speech therapy sessions. I'm not a speech therapist. This is an intense goal for using an AAC device. But apparently the student has been very successful. And then down below, below the goal progress, you have listed different factors that could go into, that the team would want to consider when moving forward with assistive technology. So this student is able to use their AAC device with adults, but not so much with peers. And we want to start thinking about, why is that? Is it that they're embarrassed to pull out an iPad when no one else is using an iPad or a larger device? Is it just because adults, we tend to modify our communication with kids a little bit more, and so it's at their level where they can be successful, and kids kind of are a little bit more flighty and a little bit more unpredictable? Why is that? And this is the place to document all of that so that you can start that conversation. All right, this is what our services and placement page looks like. This is the accommodations section. One comment I do want to make here is we have been, we as in our LEA, has been counseled by USBE to specifically list circumstances under which the student would use the service or the accommodation, excuse me, especially if you're listing PRN or as needed. So you want to say, like, the child will use a wiggle seat during whole group instruction in order to maintain attention. You don't just want to say a wiggle seat. You want to specify that. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So I just wanted to mention that there. Be as specific as you can here. So you can see a couple on this one. There's a couple of different types of AAC. There's assistive technology access to spell check, predictive text, and speech to text. There's also a calculation device when generalizing skill application outside of teaching specific skill. All right, now let's get into goals. And this is where I want all of your input, because you all have seen some fantastic goals. And there's no way to develop or to show you goals in every possible section for assistive technology, but I tried to hit a couple of different common areas. The first one is addressing written communication. So using evidence-based writing strategies as a response to a text source with or without use of assistive technology. Jake will write a multi-paragraph informative / explanatory essay with an introduction, a supporting body paragraph, and a conclusion using the conventions of standard American English to create a semi-formal tone, while scoring at least a 2.5 on a conventions and receiving a composite score of 3 on the Utah Compose rubric in 4 out of 5 data trials by May 2023. So first of all, I didn't write that goal. Somebody else did. But I mean, that's a pretty intense goal, right? But you can see how the assistive technology piece was tagged onto. I picked this specific goal because it did reference the Utah State Core. And this is a really good example of how you can write a goal that addresses an educational skill or an educational task while still weaving that assistive technology into that. And then what do you think, given this goal, what do you think the services and placement page would look like? Yeah, sorry, was your hand up? Oh. I know, it's an impressive goal, right? It's a very long goal. So the question was, looking at this goal, what might the services and placement page look like? Yeah.
Well, just where it says with or without the use of assistive technology, then that would be in the accommodations as needed area.
Yeah, absolutely. So those of you and your genius brains, what could this assistive technology be? What do you think they might be referring to? Speech to text would be a great one. So exactly like she said, then you could have speech to text listed as an accommodation so that they know specifically what that is. What might services look like for this student? like training. So with this happens to be a high school student. I pulled this from, I think this was an 11th grader, if I remember right. So with this student, if we're looking at services, we have a couple of different options. The traditional service would be something like 30 minutes a month, 60 minutes a month, something like that, where you break it down into those small chunks. I'm also a fan of breaking the system a little bit. So how could you also write these services to support the student that doesn't look like a weekly or a monthly service? Does that question make sense? Allison? Yeah, so it could be, sorry, she said quarterly. So sorry. I'm the worst at waiting for the, very impatient. So with a lot of our kids, as they're learning assistive technology, they need some front loading. They need to be trained a lot right up front, but maybe they don't need that. Once they become proficient with it, they may just need occasional check-ins. So you could write something like quarterly minutes that would allow you some flexibility in that, so that you don't have to keep coming and checking in with that kid for 60 minutes every week when the student is already proficient with the device. Yeah, Jody Lynn.
Having never written a goal for quarterly, because I don't deal with high schoolers, have you had any pushback with Medicaid and data logs and that kind of thing?
We have not had pushback with that. We have had pushback with yearly minutes. So I would not go as broad as yearly minutes. We've had pushback from both, well, not necessarily pushback. When we've asked, they've counseled against it, against yearly.
So we've been told that you can't bill for like trimester or quarterly minutes for Medicaid. So that was one thought. Like the second one, I was thinking you could maybe write a goal for being able to successfully use the assistive technology and then master the goal and do an amendment and take that service off.
Yep, you could amend it. Absolutely. That's a really good thought. We have not been told the quarterly, and we've been doing it for a long time and haven't ever, knock on wood, hasn't ever come back on us. One of the other things that you could do along with that is, if you know you have a pretty good idea, I need to spend this amount, 2 hours getting this kid set up with assistive technology, and then they're probably going to be good. You can also write into their IEP like 120 minutes of services from September 1st to October 1st, moving into whatever it is that you want to do, 30 minutes a week or consult or as needed or whatever it might be. So you can write that in as well. That's what you're going to say. Sorry, Allison, I stole it. All right. So here are some other goals. When given word prediction software, Max will independently write 1 to 2 sentences with no more than 1 verbal prompt with 80% accuracy in 4 out of 5 trials. So this one is a little bit different than the last one. I think she's chomping at the bit.
Hold on one second.
Okay.
Okay. I just had a question going back. When you're writing in the services, assistive technology support or training, who's doing that in the IEP?
That is a really good question that you probably want to specify.
Yeah.
So you saw in ours, we had like that provider section. Again, you aren't going to write down like Krisanne Lewis is providing the service, because if I die, you're going to have to go back and amend the IEP, right? So you want to just put in something general. So it could be classroom staff, it could be you at team, something along those lines. And that's an IEP team decision you have to make with your team.
In that little box, you could put IEP team.
And that is billable services.
Yes, and you could put in IEP team.
Because it's instead of like where you pick a IEP or X, right next to it, it'll put the person's name.
Yeah.
And it put, instead of putting their name, put like the team.
Yeah. Because I've never seen billing for AT support services on there. I don't know.
It's not very common, which is why we're talking about it here.
Yeah.
Because I think we do a lot behind the scenes and unofficially that we don't really realize and that we're not getting paid for. And I know that's not why we do it, but
That's how we get funded.
kind of a nice side benefit if we can get reimbursed
But
for
it
that.
is a definitely billable.
Yeah.
You can bill for AT
Yes.
support and training and stuff.
Yeah.
There was a question of where we would document those types of services. Would it be in the service and placement as an actual number of minutes? Or would you, if you were going to write something like front loaded 2 hours in September to October and fading, would you write that as an accommodation, or where would you put that?
I would put that as a direct service. sorry, was that a hand or was that a, yes?
You don't know when it's gonna fade. Sorry, I was.
No, please, yes, this is why we're here. I want you all speaking up. So absolutely. I think we had, maybe, was there another hand too? Okay.
So with the billing, do you know who the qualified professionals that are allowed to do that?
Did
Is
you,
like
sorry, did you say who are the qualified
qualified
professionals?
professionals, right? Because like certain ones have to be supervised or provided by,
Go ahead.
if it says IEP team, then who's the supervising or providing?
That,
Well,
sorry,
for,
Jodalyn.
well,
Go
you know that. Do you want to go ahead and answer it?
Um,
Like Medicaid billing wise, generally you have to have documentation. So those of you that are doing documentation, OTs, PTs, SLPs, you are the ones documenting it, but now they have special ed teachers who can go into, like Utah now has CompuClaim for some districts.
Mhm.
And special ed teachers can document in there
So,
if the district has it.
so as long as they are an authorized Medicaid provider, which includes pretty much everybody except for gen ed teachers, which I still don't get, but we won't discuss my issues, but pretty much anybody except for a gen ed teacher is an authorized Medicaid provider. Beyond that, it really depends on the type of assistive technology that it is. Like you probably wouldn't have, you could have a PT working on an AAC device. I don't know that I would have the PT working on the communication, like Medicaid would probably question that part. Maybe the posture or the positioning, excuse me, they could work on that piece, but they would probably question if you have a PT going in and working on programming a device and teaching communication 3 times a week. But a para could do that if they have the proper training and they are supervised by someone who's listed in the manual, such as an OT, a speech therapist, special ed teacher. They could all provide that supervision. Did I answer your question? You have a thought? Make it muddy, bring it. Sling some mud.
Yes, so they do have, so Medicaid does have like a breakout chart.
Uh-huh.
That said, this is
Yep.
service, this is what's going on. So just, but AT is not the one that's.
You can look, I can hold it if you want.
But AT is not one that's listed on the current chart that I was
Right.
given, right? But that's where my question comes from, because there's certain ones that go within that, but like PT inside this within the Medicaid rules for PT for existence, it's either a PT, a PTA, and then, or a therapy aid. But if it's a therapy aid, they must have an on-site PT available, right? So that's where it was. So there's a few of them that are really broad where special education teachers can do that, but I don't know.
So the way that I look at it is not, like there's not a section for assistive technology services, but there is a section for communication skills development, for motor skills development. There are those broader categories that you need to look at versus looking specifically for assistive technology, which is why I was saying you need to look at the underlying, like what are you using it for? If you are using it for communication skills development, then it would be the SLP, the SLT, or someone who's under their like a para, for example, who's under their supervision. Does that help?
And if you want to really muddy it, you could argue with Medicaid that on section 2 of an IEP, which is are language learners accommodations being addressed, is vision being addressed, is behavior being addressed, is assistive tech being addressed. The minute you mark that, it says assistive technology is needed for the student to succeed in all settings, and it's an IEP for his individual education planning team, which
Yeah.
means the team members that sign that document are their team and can provide that service.
I
But
agree.
usually Medicaid documents are through like a communication device, a speech path. But then like the OT is going to do with the motor, but
But you have to have the service provision by an appropriate by an approved provider before you can bill.
in
So-
districts, we haven't had trouble in school
Yeah,
districts.
we haven't had any trouble as long as we've had somebody within those categories. So it lists in the manual specific people who can provide services in general. And as long as it's one of those people and it's appropriate, they're an appropriate person, I guess, again, not a PT teaching communication, you should be good. You should be fine.
Okay, so I'm gonna muddy the waters probably a little bit more.
Oh my gosh, I love all these muddy waters.
So,
This is such a good, I love it. So please don't
So-
apologize.
so if you put assistive technology as a service, right? Like,
Yeah.
so we use Embrace DS
Yeah.
to bill. So, but anything that I do is going to be billed under speech and language services, not under assistive technology. So how do you like differentiate like, okay, today I went in and I worked on like their assistive technology to help them with whatever as like a UAT team member, but this day I went in and I helped them with their assistive technology as the speech pathologist.
That's a great question. So we also use Embrace DS. So I can speak specifically to that system and what we do. We specify in the narrative. So it still may be the same person. So you may be providing 120 minutes a month of speech services and 60 minutes a month of assistive technology support. And you can't, as far as I know, in DS, you can't specify the difference between the two other than in the narrative. Which always, and I don't know the answer to this. I don't know how Medicaid then, because they don't look at that. So my guess is that it would be in the audit process that they would go through and they would pull that and look to make sure that it was addressed. Did that answer your question?
So if a SPED teacher is doing that, they would need to be on Embrace DS to put that, or like the para would need to put it in
Yep.
under Embrace DS.
Yep. They would have to be an approved provider. And then the other thing, I guess I should have mentioned this, the other thing that we do to make that a little bit more clear in DS is we actually reference the goal. So it might be like that I, had worked on programming an AAC device to assist with goal number, whatever it might be. And that makes it more clear during the audit.
Right. So, and then the question is like, because you run in whatever's on their IEP, that's what you can bill for. Like, so how do you differentiate that billing? Because then it goes out to Embrace and they say, oh, it was all speech and language services, even though it's differentiated in the narrative. I provided speech language services and not necessarily UAT. And so they're looking and saying,
So right now, it doesn't matter because we're all under the bundled system still. When we switch over, there's going to be different codes that are going to go in there, different billing codes. So there will be a different billing code for speech versus AT, but we're not there yet. Right now, we
and
just
those are the little
document.
ones that are like right at the top where we've been practicing using them.
No,
they
those are
different?
different. So those, I think you're talking about diagnostic codes.
Diagnostic code, yeah.
So that's different than a diagnostic code. So your diagnostic code is different than a billing code. So when all of this is up and running, when the world explodes again, then you're going to have to put in a diagnostic code and a billing code. And there's billing codes for everything, a speech eval, a speech intervention, like you have to break it down specifically with those. So when we have, it'll actually be more clear once we have those.
Unless they do that, you might run into more.
Yeah. Hasn't rolled out yet.
Okay,
Okay, hold on.
so if reading is not a Medicaid covered skill and your AT is supporting reading skills, is the AT still a Medicaid provided? And so like the resource teacher could be doing AT and still bill Medicaid, even though
Yes.
it's academic?
Yes. Because assistive technology is a Medicaid
Assistive
billable
part of it
service.
can be covered.
Allison,
Yeah, because you can also get voc rehab from 14
What?
years and up, vocational rehab. And so that's how it kind of.
okay, so Allison thinks, really quick, Allison thinks she has a billing code. I don't know what it is off the top of my head.
Oh.
Equipment management, what's the number that goes with that? Oh, we don't have the number with it, but there should be a 5-digit number typically that goes with it.
Okay, I have an accommodation question.
Yeah.
Maybe problem solve this. If you put say they need an assistive technology, we do Google Read and Write,
Uh-huh.
or we can in our district. But this kid doesn't know how to use it, right? But it's not a goal. It's not an IEP goal, it's an accommodation. Who gets tasked to training that kid? Because I can go to the resource teacher, say high school, and they're like, I do not have time to sit down one-on-one and show this kid how to do this. But then it's not a speech goal because and that's what I have to address when I work with them. So
Right.
problem solve?
So that is, you're not going to like my answer probably, but that is an IEP team decision. So it really depends. I know, there's two answers in SPED. It's an IEP team decision. It depends. So that is an IEP team decision. If you as a speech therapist, you're a speech, right? If you as a speech therapist are part of the assistive technology team, you might get tasked with training that through your role as part of the assistive technology team. But it's not always an OT, for example, who teaches Google Read and Write, or a SPED teacher. It just really depends on who the kid has rapport with, who has the best knowledge of the tool, who has, I mean, I can't legally say this, but who has the availability, who has.
Yeah, so that's just the extra time that I have in my schedule that I'm going to, okay.
Right.
Okay. I
And
just
this
wanted
is, and coming back to this is why we are, this is why we're having this discussion, talking about documenting services in an IEP, because it would be really helpful to have that clarified during the IEP meeting. Because if you put in the IEP just that the student will have access to Google Read and Write and will use it, but don't have a discussion about who's going to train the student, who's going to support it, who's going to implement it, then it doesn't ever get done, because you don't just take that on unless it's been assigned or delegated. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. So I work with speech therapy, and currently we put the assistive technology goal under communication. So it's a communication goal. So what would be the pros and cons as listing using assistive technology for communication under communication versus listing it separately under assistive technology? And let me know if that came out right.
Yeah, and sorry, say that again.
You answer it, no.
I was, again, I think it's an IEP team decision. In our LEA, our speech pathologists are the first line of defense, so to speak, with AAC devices. So if they feel like that they can check out an AAC device, they can recommend a device, they can train on it, support it, whatever, we leave that to our speech pathologists because they know the kid better than we do. They're going to be with that kid all the time, whereas our assistive technology team may have only met the kid 3 or 4 times or 1 time. So it really depends, but there are circumstances where, like I'm thinking of a situation just recently where we had a pretty hard kid with apraxia who was struggling. He's 7th grade, right? 7th grade. And he won't use anything that looks different than his peers. And so we brought the AT team in to provide more support because they didn't have the knowledge of like what could go on a phone versus an iPad, stuff like that. Did that answer your question? I kind of got on a tangent there.
Are you talking like AAC, or are you talking like assistive tech, like reading, writing? Sorry. Okay. So
yeah, it could be listed, if you're a speech therapist, it could be listed as either.
yeah, as a speech, you
And
can
I
list
don't-
it as either as a speech path.
And maybe I'll
because you're
pose that
still gonna
question to
do
the
the
room
device.
is, do you guys see a benefit or a drawback to one or the other? Allison?
As soon as they do billing codes, it'll matter.
I'm like, well, the kid should be using it all day long. So, I mean, could there not be another goal in a different area to support the use of the AAC device elsewhere? Outside of speech?
I think what she's asking is, do you
That's what she's using mostly. So she's like, can I write the goal as a communication, and then under services, is that what you're talking about? Service and placement? Yes, because it's communication, right? And then in your accommodations, and the accommodations put that they use a speech output
Whatever it
device,
is
or
that they
however you
use.
want to phrase it. And you'd be okay because in your second section on the IEP, you're going to also have AT there. Yes, but
Absolutely.
again, with billing, once they get to where they're going to start rolling out the billing, and you'll have the diagnostic and then the billing code, they may, but until that starts hitting our scrams, you're okay to do it that way right now.
All right, so we have just about 17 minutes left. I'm going to let you guys go through some of these other goals. You can read them through. These are just examples of how you can, different ways that you can incorporate it. One thing I did want to point out with this top goal, given word prediction software, this is just one difference. The previous goal, if you remember, just said with the use of assistive technology, and this one was a little bit more specific given word prediction software. So either way is perfectly fine, just somewhere in that, with this goal, given word prediction software, I would still put word prediction software in as an accommodation, but in the actual goal, it's just a matter of preference whether you include that device really in that spot or not. Okay, special factors. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time on this. I'm sure you all know that assistive technology needs must be discussed in every IEP. That doesn't mean that kid is going to end up with assistive technology in as part of their IEP, but it has to be a discussion. That's why it is listed as one of those special factors, along with behavior, communication, Braille, I can't remember the rest of them, but all those fun check boxes. And again, this is what it looks like in our system. I'm finding in most systems, it looks pretty similar. So if you have assistive technology, if the student needs it, then you're going to check that second box that says that they need it. I did put here, I made a list of possible considerations to look at. This is by no means a comprehensive list. There's a million other things that you would want to think about with that student. But for example, with reading, you want to look at what does their comprehension look like? What does their fluency look like? What does their vocabulary look like? Are they able to decode words? Maybe they can decode, but they aren't comprehending. What does their vision look like? Both visual acuity and visual perception. If they're not able to track when they read visually, that's a problem. If they are not able to differentiate the contrast on a page, that's a problem. So you want to look at all of these different issues when you're looking at assistive technology supports. And I think it was Jody Lynn in her session this morning that said she had a student who I think was struggling with reading, and it was as simple as glasses was like their assistive technology for this, and that could be the case. Well, I don't know if she actually wrote down. You have to ask her.
Well, no, we didn't write glasses, but we mean like, you can have something that basic is what helps that
It's
child.
what helps the student to access their
You
education.
got to find out if it's something like accessing it just means they can't see. We got to give them some glasses or a pencil grip. Like, you're not going to write a pencil grip in there unless they can absolutely not write unless that pencil grip is stuck on a pencil.
Yeah.
But those are still assistive tech items the team used, correct?
And that they would want to consider.
But they don't necessarily all end up on an IEP. But on her IEP, we can put, she's failed vision significantly and cannot see when her glasses are not in place. Please, in the comment section, make sure her glasses are there for academic areas.
So I teach in a special ed preschool, and I think this goes with all our self-contained units.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always been a question on if you check that box, but if you are using something low tech, high tech, you should be checking they are using assistive tech.
And again,
And
this
some
is
teachers
my,
only if it's an iPad or
this
only
is
if it's
my
a-
personal opinion. But if the child needs that device in order to access their education, so they absolutely can't
Text,
write.
anything that they're using though.
Yeah.
I'm talking low tech or.
Yep. If they have a token economy system and they cannot function in the day without their token economy system, I would
They
put it
should
in their
check
IEP, and they should check that. That's my personal opinion. And you all are free to disagree.
Buttons, apparently.
Oh, I'm being really bad at passing out buttons. Oh my gosh, you guys, I'm so sorry. I was so excited about them and then I forgot to hand them out.
Buttons on the
Was there a hand over here? Did I miss a hand somewhere?
I have one more and I can go get more.
Okay. Along with this, I stole this form from somewhere. I don't honestly remember where. I think at the bottom it says Payson Unified School District. I don't know how it made it to us. Anybody here from Payson?
She said it's from Arizona. Sorry, I'm like not fast enough.
When-
I'm trying to repeat what I can hear.
When I was on, I think the leadership team one time, I don't remember when, we found this, we adapted it a little bit and then sent it out to everybody. And it came from Arizona, Payson, Arizona. So that's where it came from.
Not Payson, Utah.
Arizona.
Share that you put, yeah.
Payson, Arizona. This clears up a great mystery that I've been wondering about for a long time. But we use this in a lot of our IEPs. This is an assistive technology consideration document. And I feel like it's really helpful for your LEA when they're guiding that IEP discussion. This is a really good starting point, especially if the person who's leading the discussion is not very familiar with assistive technology. Yeah.
So our district had this, but it was really complicated, not for us necessarily, but for an IEP team. This was wordy, it had lots of stuff. So we just took this and we adapted it and we put like writing skills, reading skills, math skills, and then we made check boxes.
Oh, I love that.
And so we took this and we simplified and adapted with check boxes so that they could easily scan through it, and it was separated by task. But we stole it from this.
This is one of my very favorite things about working in education is that you start with something and over time it just evolves and it keeps getting better and better and better. So yeah, this is not at all, you don't feel like you have to use this. I'm providing it as just an option, and adapt it. Put some pictures on there. I love that. I did link this at the end of the presentation. I did put a few different resources that I want to talk through here. These are just things that have helped us. Again, they're not requirements. The first one was that consideration support document, that we just talked about. The second is an AT continuity record, and I'm going to pull it up so you guys can see what it looks like. We adapted this one. I don't know who we adapted it from. Someone. We took it and adapted it, but I don't think online can see this. No one can see this. I'm going to pull this. I don't know how to even show that because it's your computer, huh? Okay, I'm going to describe it. Okay, oh, it did. Yay, thank you. Okay, this is our continuity record. So at every IEP, as they're having the consideration discussion, our team fills out this continuity record. So they write down whatever assistive technology the student is using, and then they circle how well the student is able to access the device, and then how independent they are with the device. And then we have them document just a few words about student preferences. So if we have a kiddo who's really obsessed with vacuums, that's their thing, then they'll write down vacuums or Pokemon or whatever it is. This is incredibly helpful. Oh, and they write down when the assistive technology is used, if it's only used in math or whenever. This is really, really helpful when our assistive technology team gets pulled in to do an assessment, because we can look at the last 3 or 4 years of what's been tried with the kid, and we know what's been successful, what hasn't been successful, and then we have a place to build on. This has been really helpful because it takes less than 2 minutes to fill this out, but over time, you're able to look at the growth. What this also has done is it forces our team to look at the actual device and decide if it is effective or if something else would work better. What we were finding prior to this was that we would just use the same device year after year after year because nobody knew what else to do, and it was already in the kids' IEP, and so they just stuck with it.
Question from chat.
Yeah.
Could the adapted form that the participant mentioned be included for AT consideration? I don't know who made the comment, but their form might be useful as well. Thanks.
I'm sorry, repeat that. I did not get that question. Sorry.
Could the adapted form that the participant mentioned be included for AT considerations?
I will add, yeah, they're wanting your form is what they're asking for, I think.
They're looking for it on a Google Drive.
Yeah, we will work on getting that. We'll see if we can track it down for you guys.
One thing that's helpful with, if you have forms like this that you adapt, on the bottom put like adapted from and where you got it, and then for such and such a district. Because I honestly take most forms and I make them fit my personality. Let's be honest. Anyway, because my brain processes the things I have, but when I put that on the bottom and I can go back to the original, or someone asks me and they want that, I just put it in like 9-point font, so it's little, but then I remember, like I don't have to remember where I got it because I can never remember that part of it. But just moving forward, it just makes it a little bit easier.
And then in our last couple minutes, I'm just going to describe what these are. I'm not going to pull them up. So we have a data sheet. We have both a a hard copy, like a paper data sheet, and then we've used Google Forms to make an online data sheet for those of our staff members who prefer the electronic version. And this allows us to take data on the effectiveness of any type of tool. So our teachers typically fill it out because that's typically where they're using it the most, is in the classroom. And it's just a rating scale where they mark how successful the student is so that we can monitor their growth. We do have a follow-up form as well. This is for our assistive technology team. When they go in and check in with the kids, they can send a copy home to the parent so that the family knows that we've checked in with that student. We do also have a functional handwriting assessment. As an OT, I have found this to be helpful when we're looking at what is more successful for the student, like keyboarding or written, like handwriting, or is it speech to text or handwriting, so that we have a point of comparison. We have a parent AT worksheet. This is what we give to our parents to fill out so that they can talk about what they know about the student. And then we have a speech to text evaluation that we have been using. Again, we stole it. I think the reference is on there. We stole it from somewhere. All right, that is all I have for today, but my contact information is on the next slide, my email address. I also have a whole bag of buttons that I need to give out by the end of today. So if y'all want a button, come on up before the end of the session. Oh, we borrowed the continuity form from Nebo. Who's in Nebo? Nebo? Way to go, Nebo. You're doing great things. I knew it. You guys are doing amazing things. All right, you guys, I know this is your last session and you're itching to get out of here. So I really appreciate you hanging with this a little bit muddy discussion. I appreciate it. If you have questions, come on up. Otherwise, grab a button and have a good night.